Before I head off to Mount Edgcumbe, let me just show you a couple of camellias I have in the front garden. This is just looking out the front window at Camellia Navajo. And the other way, you can see how flowery it is. Masses of buds, masses of flower over a long period. And this is in full sun in front of a white painted wall, so it's really quite glary, and it loves it. So if you have those sort of conditions and you want to grow camellias, the sasanquas are the ones to go for. Alongside Navajo is Paradise Belinda, which is reckoned by some to be the best of the Paradise series for UK conditions. And then next to that is Paradise Little Leanne, which simply won't flower at all if it's in too much shade. Up at Mount Edgcumbe, 4 days after Storm Darragh blew through. This is looking north-northwest up the Tamar, and that's exactly the direction the wind was coming in. And this is the sort of consequences you get. Camellia RL Wheeler blown over, probably salvageable, unlike this beech, which I don't think will be. But in the same area, Camellia sasanqua gay Sue, looking pretty unscathed. A bit more shelter. This is a very good New Zealand variety, good sized flowers, semi-double over a long period of time. And then not far from that, one of Dr. William Ackerman's cold hardy varieties, Winter's Tuffy. Bit of an unruly bush, but these pretty little semi-double pink flowers, masses of them. And then a little bit further along, a group of 3 camellias flowering. Now these are not autumn flowering things. This is one called Merry Christmas, and that white margin that it has usually betrays the parentage of Tama no Ura, a wild collected Japanese variety. That white margin is never very broad on this. I've seen pictures of it with a much wider white margin. Next to that are 2 plants, both labelled Peter Betterley, but not the same. They were thought to be the same thing when the park got hold of them, but it turns out that they're sister seedlings. And the more I see them, the more they appear to be different. Both flower very early. 39, this one is a couple of weeks earlier than the other one, but both are now out. And they have a very similar form to them. This is showing a bit of damage from the wind, but they've stood up to it remarkably well. And then this is the other one, which is a shallower flower, white, flatter flower, and more inclined to get this sort of purplish colouring to it. But both are worth having, and they would. I thought they were too similar to be worth giving separate names, but now I'm coming around to the view that they perhaps aren't, that they're different enough to be both acknowledged. Moving on, this is Camellia williamsii John Pickthorn. It's one of the original Williams crosses from Care Hayes, named after J.C. Williams' godson. Always flowers early. And not far from that is this Australian variety called Thomas Cornelius Cole, which has great big flowers, probably 4.5 inches across. Often flowers early, but not consistently so. Monica Dance is another Care Hayes cross. And then we have Nobilissima, which is another that always flowers early. And these white flowers stand up to the midwinter weather surprisingly well. nice Vanessa, only had the one bloom. So moving down into the species section, this is showgirl, which often by this time of year is in full flower. This year it seems to have been held back a bit. And this bush, which usually performs the best of the three that they have of it in the park, has been the one most badly affected by the weather, which seems to have got into this usually very sheltered spot and has taken out this big bush of Kanjiro, which was very close by. Excellent variety with these bright magenta flowers on it. There were three, this is the third one. A rather different habit, wide spreading. Used to be labelled Hiryu, which is a name that's been misused for it a lot. Still in the same area, this is Yoimachi, which is a Fraterna cross sasanqua variety. An autumn flower and a spring flower hybridised, and that's reflected in its very, very long flowering season. These very pretty flowers. Slightly let down by its foliage, I feel. Down in the lower amphitheatre now. Shiro Wabazuki is still flowering. Beautifully perfumed variety. These small trumpet-shaped flowers. And near to that is Ginryu, which is a Vernalis, a hybrid between japonica and sasanqua. And this is a very old variety going back probably 400 years. There's a little bit of pink on the bud sometimes, which comes through as the pink on the back of the petals. Garden Glory is a williamsii raised by Nuccios. You don't get many williamsii out of America. This is the best I've seen it, and by far the earliest I've seen it flowering. And right in front of that is Showgirl number 2. This is usually later and not as good a performer as the one before, but is doing rather well this year, and you can see how close it is to Plymouth Sound and the exposure. But you're facing east there, and we don't so often get easterly winds. At the back of that same section is another of the Ackerman cold hardy varieties. This is Winter's Joy, and of the varieties of his in the park, this is probably the showiest of them. Fluted petals. Beside it is a bush of Winter's Charm. In fact, there's one either side of it. Smaller, paler flowers. What a good doer. And a little way along from that is Winter's Interlude. All of these benefited from a very big tree coming down and letting an awful lot more light in. They didn't do that, they hardly flowered at all before that came down. And then very much closer to the water still is Showgirl number 3, and this is usually a poor performer because it's in such exposure. But this year the wind was blowing in the right direction, and it's looking as good as I've ever seen it. These flowers are about 5 to 5.5 inches across, which in December and January is a pretty extraordinary sight. Souvenir de Claude Brevet was a French oleifera hybrid. It's supposed to be white striped, but this has reverted to solid pink, but still quite good. So this is the amphitheatre pond. The ducks wanting a bit of feed. And then panning round the view of the amphitheatre, every last leaf has been stripped off the trees now. A week ago they seemed to be hanging on quite late. They're all gone now. A lot of very big, very old trees in this view. In fact, come back and just hang on a minute. I spotted that. Horizontal branches, not a good sign. And it turns out to be this. Victim of Darragh. This is a lime tree, pretty close to 100 feet tall, multi-stemmed, and now lying through one of the oldest camellia sections on a very, very steep slope where it's going to be very difficult to get it out. So, not wanting to leave on that note, in the Earl's Garden, Shanosaki. These keep on turning up, usually under other names. That ended so abruptly, I thought I'd better tack a little bit on the end here. A bit more of my Navajo in the front garden. To say thank you for watching, and to say that I'll try and produce another episode in January, weather permitting.